Sometimes when I'm thinking about us, before we got lost and we parted, back to back we would carry on and we'd do anything for what we started. But this time we could break. I'm running dry, everything's the same. We'll try tonight. This time we're not safe and sound, not safe and sound. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. Sometimes when I'm reasoning about us, I know you got me, it's so effortless. Back to back we would carry on and we'd do anything for what we started. But this time we could break. I'm running dry, everything's the same. We'll try tonight. This time we're not safe and sound, not safe and sound. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me?
Welcome, everybody, to the FPV News. I'm so happy to be here with you and bring you the latest news in the world of FPV, along with my co-hosts. It's Blunty. How you doing, man?
Good, Joshua. How's it going?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. I'm always happy on a Tuesday night to be... You know, people were asking for you in yesterday's live stream. There was one guy, I think maybe he hadn't figured out that you're... He was like, where's Blunty? Where's Blunty? I was like, he'll be here tomorrow.
Wrong day.
And then I realized that you had become more popular than me, and I had to kill you.
Oh,
It's nothing personal.
well, darn.
I'll miss you. No, I would miss you. I would miss you. You're super helpful. I actually don't know what I'd do without you, man. I mean that too. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll start off on a sentimental note. Let's be serious, though. Thank you guys so much for being here on a Tuesday evening. We're very happy to have you. Here you are. Here you are on my chat. I got you up. I'll be checking out your chat messages. And thank you to these folks over here in my Discord server, my patrons. I'll be hanging out with you guys as well as we go through the news. And we got some big stories this week, Blunty. We are going to revisit yesterday's story, last week's story about Caddx Vista, some news, a leaked piece of news about the Caddx Vista that some people took a little further than we tried to stop them from taking.
Because it's the internet.
Yeah. And there's two things about the internet that are true. And one is that no matter how hard you try to sort of temper your message, some people will just not read the fine print and take it way too far. And number two, no one will comment on anything until you make a statement, and then they'll rebut your statement. which is what's happening, So we got some updates on that. What else we got this week? What's coming? What else we got this week?
Well, we've got an Insta360 Cube that came, a photo that came out, a screen image, and then a bunch of people were like, is this real or not? And then Insta360 commented on it. So I guess we'll talk about that.
Anytime someone promises to make a replacement for the GoPro Hero session, then everybody's like, oh, is it happening? And frankly, I can't think of the Insta360 Cube. When we look at this picture, it's uniquely appropriate. Yeah. So that's some of the stuff we'll talk about. We got some HDZero news as always. Actually, surprisingly, not really any DJI news this week. So for those of you who are tired of some...
Other than the Caddx story, yeah.
I guess that's DJI news. Okay, that's fair. It's not Caddx news. Anyway, lots of news. Let's get into it, though, with... we always like to start the week with public service announcements. Not the most newsworthy stuff, but stuff that, for those of you who are affected by them, might help save you from a lost quad, a burned ESC, important little tidbits. And the first one, Blunty, is for anyone who is using the ViFly WhoopStor. Now, people who don't fly tiny whoops might not know a lot about this. I think this is, I'm going to go out on a limb. I think this is the best whoop charger, if I had to pick one.
Yeah, for what it does and for all the features that are in it and all the different pieces and parts of it, it does seem like it is a great option for 1S charging and discharging. Yeah,
it's got storage charging, which literally no one else has. Has BT 2.0, PH 2.0 connectors, only about $25. This is not a commercial for the WhoopStor. This is to say that if you own the WhoopStor, it has a problem with its firmware. Do you know what the problem? Do we know what the problem is, Blunty?
I do not know what the problem is. I didn't hear about it until this message, and all I know is that they are telling people if you have the V1 to send them a message to their support, and they will provide a new version replacement. So that's support@viflydrone.com, and they'll provide a replacement for the V2. So I'm not sure exactly what the issue was. I know some people had some problems, but
I thought it was that it wasn't fully charging the batteries on one side. That's what comment I thought I saw on their Facebook page. Like, it wasn't like I don't think it was like your batteries will explode, it'll light on fire kind of a problem, but just like an annoying, it doesn't work like it should problem. And regardless, it's awfully cool that ViFly is saying, hey, we'll send you a brand new one. So that's good.
Yeah.
So if you have that charger, take them up on their offer, and, why not? That's PSA number 1. PSA number 2 is the kind of thing that could destroy your quad.
Yes.
How do we want to approach this, Blunty?
Basically, the PSA is if you are using 4.3 RC4 or RC5, you should not be using GPS return to home. Is a critical failure, and it will cause you to unrecoverably crash. And I believe it is like every time you use it if you don't use the switch.
Yeah. Well, what's really frustrating about this is that if you use the GPS rescue switch or maybe even the failsafe aux mode to test it,
correct,
it works fine. This bug only pops up when you actually have a failsafe, and then the quad just flies to the moon. Apparently every time.
Yeah, so they are obviously working on this, but this is just another reminder. If anybody isn't aware or they forgot, I put up a post and try to remind people as well. If you don't know what a release candidate is, typically they're a little more stable than this, but a release candidate always means that it is not ready for release. It means that it is a candidate for release, and there could be bugs that make you lose your quad. Typically it's more stable. I mean, typically RC is after the alphas and betas and stuff, after you've tested stuff in PRs and done a lot of personal testing. However, it is the case that they found some major issues in the RC stage, and since you're already in RC stage, now that is part of this process. So just always remember, if you're flashing these RCs, you have some risk to your quad. So just be aware of this. And you should probably always update your RCs and then try to follow development too. If you're using RC3, you might find out that, they discovered a critical bug in RC3 you haven't found yet. So that's why there are updates in the RCs. But however, if you update, you might have GPS RTH not work. So you got to follow these things, keep an eye out, and know that you're testing software that is not, ready for
Yes.
release.
It's super frustrating because
Yeah.
you could certainly understand why people might get complacent. Betaflight release candidates usually don't have major game-breaking bugs. They usually have small bugs that get sorted and are usually safe to use. And Betaflight through RC3, again, had relatively good performance. There was a bug that affected SPI-based receivers, and they were having failsafe. There was a bug that affected Crossfire with Crossfire V3. So it's not saying that it's perfect, and it certainly is acknowledging that it hasn't been as stable as some. But for them to introduce a new flyaway bug between 3 and 4, isn't the point to fix bugs? How did you? And as you said, Blunty, they discovered a rare bug and decided the right thing to do was to fix it. And in fixing it, they introduced an even worse bug. So their hearts are in the right place.
Yeah, they're basically working through and unwinding that GPS RTH code now that they've worked through a lot of the failsafe code, and they are every day working through to make sure that it is better and better and get it closer to release. So all I could say is if you want to help with that testing, there's some great work going on in the development channel over on the Betaflight Discord. And if you're willing to, test some RTH stuff or whatever, I'm sure they would not mind the help. So.
Yeah. What does this mean? CTZ Suze said this is going to take a long time to fix. And I read that and thought, oh my God, everybody's been hoping that okay, we're 2 weeks from a release. And now how long is this going to take to fix? Who knows? No one knows.
Yeah, we don't really know. I can say that they are working on it daily and they're doing the best they can to get it fixed. And anybody who has that experience or whatever, they're working through it to try to figure out, hey, what's going on here and why isn't this failing and what's not triggering what, and they're looking at logs and all that stuff. So yeah, as soon as it kind of just depends on what they find and how tangled the web is that they weaved, I think.
I kind of want to go back and look for all the Betaflight releases ever, what the highest number of RCs has been.
Yeah, I didn't check very far back, but it seems like typically RC6, I think I saw a RC8.
So we're kind of on track.
Yeah. Okay. But I don't think any of them had such critical bugs, though I wasn't applying too much at the time. So.
All right. Anyway. Well, we got the word out there, and now we know.
Yes.
And now you know. So, all right, moving on to the first sort of real story this week. Caddx swears Vista not dead. Blunty, can you recap for us? Because we didn't say last week, Caddx Vista dead. Although I do admit that we struggled with the title of last week's video because we had a leak from a retailer that suggested perhaps there were going to be supply issues. And we only have so many characters to put into the title. And we struggled with what would sort of communicate that without being dishonest. And we came up with, I mostly came up with, DJI says Caddx Air Unit and Vista ending. So if that was the only thing you saw, I don't blame you. But you got to watch the bit. You can't just read the title. What did they say last week? Just a recap.
So the recap from last week was the source said that as far as they could tell, when they tried to order air units and Vistas, they were told by their representatives that they could not order air units, that they were being discontinued, and that the Vistas were on very low supply. And that's the information that we had been given and that we basically shared. And I feel like we were pretty clear about that if you listen to the segment.
If you listen to the segment, we were very clear.
Yeah.
I just couldn't figure out a way to fit into the number of characters that YouTube gives me air unit ending and Vista in very short supply. So there you go. But having put out that very nuanced piece where we discussed all the possibilities, Caddx's response. So apparently people blew Caddx up.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'm not surprised. They're like, what are you doing? Is it ending? And Caddx, and then they forwarded the Caddx messages on to me. So what did Caddx say?
Caddx says the air unit and Vista won't stop producing. We are experiencing another chip shortage, so that might affect the production of some models, for example, the DJI cameras. They also said there will be no Vista V2 currently, nothing changed. For alternative, you can use our other cameras. So
go ahead.
What it sounds like is that basically, my guess is that this vendor tried to order, air units and Vistas with the OG cameras. And they were met with the message that they could not order them because they were the OG cameras and those are not being produced. They said that's affecting the production of, some models. It seems like likely there were cross wires and that there's low supply on most things, but the stock was ending and low for air unit like OG original cameras. And this is
can I point out that we threw that out as a possibility?
Yeah.
That we said, the timing is interesting here. With leaks about the goggles V3 coming out, it's possible that this means that they're discontinuing the air unit and the Vista and they're releasing a V3. And then we went on to say, also, it could just be normal supply issues. We just don't know.
Yeah.
Caddx is saying that it's normal supply issues and they're going to continue to produce it.
I would say they said they experienced another chip shortage. As far as I know, we've heard from other channels that aren't like super sourceable. I know a couple of different websites that put out information about like xenon gas and a couple other like sources of chip manufacturing stuff. It does seem like there is a shortage coming. I know there's like in general from chip manufacturing places, and there was talk of shifting STM32 equipment over to other equipment, even though it's like larger, it's a higher nanometer count. They can still reuse the machines in certain processes in the other production, from what I was reading about. So it looks like possibly we may be seeing like some general chip shortages from that information and from that stuff. And so in addition to that, part of that may be the sensor shortages from the OG cameras. That's what we saw before. However, if you'll remember, when we had the previous shortage, they told us it was based on sensors, but we could not get the Nebula Pro at the same time. So I'm interested to know, like, what is actually short here? Are the sensors short? Do they have a backstock of Nebula Pros? Or is there an AP1302 missing and we'll have a problem with 120 FPS cameras? So it's still a little bit up in the air. We didn't get super clear information, but at least we got some idea that you will still be able to buy air units and Vistas with some quality cameras for a while. So.
According to Caddx, and here's the part where I think I have a little bit, like, I don't want to, I feel like I need to walk a fine line between being realistic and being respectful. And obviously, Caddx has a vested interest in their own survival, and they communicate with DJI about their ability to produce and sell these components. And they have to get information about that, or they could not, exist. At the same time, I don't think that Caddx is the one making this decision. I'm sure that DJI is the one making this decision, and not just DJI customers, but also DJI business partners will speak to how DJI can turn on a dime and F you over if they decide that's in their best interest to do it. So the fact that Caddx is saying, oh, no, don't worry, they're going to keep making these for a long time, and presumably that's what DJI is telling them, I feel like there's still a possibility that Caddx and us may be a victim of DJI's sort of, I don't know how to put it, obtuse, big ship kind of a situation. So I wouldn't take what Caddx says as the absolute gospel, since they're not actually the one making this decision, but they probably know better than us.
They also have a pretty poor track record. We never got canvas mode.
Which they said they were working on.
And we never got the encryption, which they threatened and then backed off on. And DJI was like, why are you even doing that? No, that's not okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not so confident with Caddx messaging, but hopefully this is a sign that at least there is some heavy stock of these items for them to be telling people to continue buying them. That's okay. Also, I think it's interesting to say no Vista V2. I don't know that we necessarily expected a Vista V2. I get where they kind of mentioned that based on V3 goggles and new VTXs.
Right.
However, I don't know that Vista V2 is what I would expect them to make.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It makes more sense for me if that's a dual band system for them to use the air unit as the first VTX, because the air unit already has capacity for both bands in it. If it's still on P1, then literally all you should do is slap the other stuff in there and then put out the air unit as a dual band unit. So,
yeah, it makes sense that, anyway. So that's the update,
Yeah.
It looks like at this time, as we get more evidence, what's going to happen is a chip shortage and a reduction in supply. Can I point out that before last week's story that you and I, quote unquote, broke, no one knew that there was going to be a shortage. which people seem Caddx. So we got a leak and we said, this leak, what could it mean? Well, could it mean that it's going to be discontinued? Maybe with the V3 goggle, or maybe it could mean a shortage. And Caddx came out and said, no, it's not discontinued. There's going to be a shortage. Let's not miss the fact that we didn't know that until we made that story. I don't know. I'm just trying to, I just feel like when we go off of leaks, there's always a chance that we'll put out wrong information. And when we speculate, there's always a chance we'll be wrong.
I think a lot of people don't understand how leaks work. Because, like, we'll talk about this as we move through these other stories, but, you know, if you source a leak, that's not a leak, right? Like,
right.
It's a source story. So, like, if you're getting leaked information, that's because it came from somewhere that is, like, giving you, like, unsourceable information. I mean, the whole point of it is that. Like, so you can't say that, like, hey, if you're sharing a leak with me, it's got to be for real, and you've got to check all your sources and ask everybody if it's going to happen. Because that's how leaks work. You would never get information if you sourced every leak, because every leak is not sourceable. That's why it's a leak, right? That's kind of the whole point here, right? If we have a real story, or if you have a source story, then you're going to get more legitimate information from the source, and then you're going to have at least somebody to fall back on and some information about where it came from. But like, the whole premise of leaks is that we're giving you information we think is valuable enough to share with you and has some basis in reality because of the source of the leak.
Yeah.
Right.
Certainly if there's a valid criticism to make, it's that we could have waited a week and asked Caddx for comment instead of getting the leak 20 minutes before the show went on the air and going, oh my God, this is huge. And then jumping
and my pushback on that was Caddx's comments are, yes, we're doing canvas mode. Don't worry, it's coming. Like, that's the same Caddx. Like, I don't trust a comment from Caddx. I feel like we
get a more honest answer when we put the leak out there and put them on the back foot, and they have to say no, instead of being obtuse, or saying no comment.
Agree.
Anyway, now you know. And if you bought a couple of Caddx Vistas last week, well, it was probably still a good idea, because apparently a shortage is potentially coming.
By the way, that leak information goes for any news that you watch.
That's true.
Extend that. Just remember that. If you don't see sources on a story, if you don't have a sourced something from someone that news place has given you, that is a leak or unsourced information, and it should be taken as such. We all should remember that in our day-to-day.
All right, let's move on. Next up, there's some drama in the world of HDZero pricing. Last week or several weeks ago, HDZero announced their new VRX was coming, and HDZero announced it would be at a price of $200. And then retailers' product pages went up, and it was not $200, was it, Blunty?
Yeah, I'll just say, last week we talked about margins, and I commented that I thought, these margins were a little rough, and I had heard rumblings, and what ended up happening basically was Pyrodrone, Race Day Quads, and Get FPV, I believe, were the major three that put it up for $240 instead of $200. And then we got a comment by Surge from Pyrodrone, and then Surge basically made this comment. He said, essentially, everything we sell from HDZero is pretty much no profit or loss. By the time we factor expenses, overhead, import fees, and shipping, we're literally spending money to sell us products. So essentially, he says that they've explained this to them in back channels. Other retailers have discussed it with them as well, and they just can't keep selling at this price. So they upped the price, and a couple other retailers did as well. And
customers were annoyed because they were told by the manufacturer that it would sell for $200, and then stores had it for $240, and they didn't know who to be mad at. It's worth pointing out that, the idea that there will be a single price for a product is a little weird. Like,
it is privilege, I would say.
Yeah, right? Shouldn't stores set their own prices? They never do, it seems. Everything goes for MSRP. But in this case, several stores broke ranks in a way and decided they would sell for a higher price. And which I mean, we had heard rumblings of this before without naming names, that stores were not happy with the margin. They felt like they were losing money. They couldn't afford the warehouse space, and HDZero was not listening to their concerns and offering them a higher margin. What did HDZero say?
So yeah, we got in that same imager link there, we got a comment from Carl. So Carl came back essentially and said, about our margins. Our margins have been low since the beginning. Most of the resellers are carrying them for the sake of the hobby, sometimes even at a loss. So they do admit that, right? The global IC shortage makes HDZero bill of materials high, and DJI prices set a cap for HDZero MSRP, practically speaking, because they at least don't want to go over the DJI prices. However, resellers selling HDZero products at a loss is not okay. It was never my intention. Currently, VTX and the cameras are 20% margins and 22% for 100 plus. Freestyle VTX will have the same improved margins in the second batch, so that means the last margins were worse. I worked very hard to source components at reasonable prices. I announced MSRP at $200 without consulting any reseller's opinion. It is a mistake I made, but a lesson is learned. I see lots of confusion from customers. As this VTRX's entry point, this is even more saddening. I'm negotiating with major retailers or resellers in the US by offering 22.7% margin to make sure the VRX is available and affordable to pilots. I believe we all need to work together to support each other, manufacturers, retailers, from pilots. Chip shortages made things very tough. We work together to share this hardship equally. For a little while longer, chip prices will eventually decrease. So, and then he thanks some of the pilots who've worked on it, Ryan, Anthony, and Alf and stuff. Yeah.
So, I don't know. This is, it's interesting to see behind the curtain a little bit. Most people just buy products and don't think too much about margins. And most of the time, discussions about margins are handled between the retailer and the manufacturer and are not brought out into the public like this. Everybody who has talked about this has weighed in on whether they think the margins are realistic. Some people feel that the margins are fine. Some people feel that they're unfortunately low but normal in this day and age, and other people feel they're preposterously low. And obviously, Serge from Pyrodrone, who made a public statement, who said basically after shipping, we're losing money on this. And we can't afford to sell it. I mean, that's the argument he makes. That's the bottom line to me. Like, whether HDZero feels or people feel like the margin is reasonable, if the stores all collectively said, we're going to raise the price, I mean, they're putting their foot down. And they know that other stores are going to sell it for $200. And maybe they'll lose money on it. And they know that they're going to lose sales. So the fact that these three major stores all collectively went to $240 says to me that this is like a real issue. It's not just whining.
Yeah. I mean, our margins are pretty low, for sure. So 22.7% is definitely better than the previous margins, but it is still pretty low in comparison. So hope they continue to work together on this stuff. We can note that the margins have changed. And I believe some retailers have changed to a price of $220, which is like I believe is a new map. But I'm not 100% sure. However, Pyrodrone, Race Day Quads, and Get FPV are still at $240, and they seem to continue to want to sell at that price. So I think they feel like that's still the price they need to make their money.
I mean, the bottom line is that this actually feels like a healthy, competitive marketplace, that you've got stores, smaller stores with less overhead selling for $200, and maybe they're making money, or maybe they're just using it as a loss leader and they're willing to lose money, but who cares? That's their business decision. This idea that all the stores should sell at exactly MSRP is in of itself kind of weird. So, yeah. Anyway, that's why the price of the HDZero VRX is not $200 at every store, like people kind of thought it would be. We got a couple
people. I just want to say a couple of people in chat are talking about price fixing, but I would just argue that that is extremely hard to prove. And if you consider that a retailer could put a price up and then 5 minutes later another retailer could check that price and then match it, there's nothing illegal about that. So I think that while we could talk about that kind of thing, I don't think there's any way to prove that or say that that actually happened.
I also thought it was suspicious that Pyro, Get FPV, and Race Day Quads all listed the product in their pre-order page at $240, the exact same price. And there's nothing there to accuse anybody of price fixing or collaboration, but I did notice that they all came up with the same price somehow. So
all right.
I thought that was weird too. All right. Got one more piece of HDZero related news. Well, not HDZero, Sharkbyte.
Yes. Sort of HDZero.
Sort of HDZero.
Yeah. So there's a comment on Mads Tech's videos, the HDZero VRX video he posted, which is kind of interesting. We verified that the account that posted here is the FatsharkRC account, at least has been previously. They're the ones who posted the original video for the Sharkbyte VRX range, and they're the ones who were commenting originally on stuff for the company on YouTube. I believe Greg was originally running this account, and then we saw a post from them a few months ago, or a month ago or two, that talked about the ScoutHD and then production of that and where that was at. And now we've got a comment from them. It's hard to know for sure if this is still in control of Fatshark or if it's like somebody who used to work there who still has it or something, which would be odd. But it does seem to be legit from what we can tell. And they commented in reply that they sold 2,000 units of Sharkbyte total. 500 went to enterprise, which means I would assume commercial contacts or something, and then 1,500 to the FPV market, and 500 were sold at that full price level, and 1,000 were sold at that $100 price that we talked about, that a lot of people saw and kind of thought was the price.
I think there's two really fascinating things about this, and one is that the entire hobbyist HDZero market is apparently around 1,500 units. Some ScoutHDs have been sold, so maybe it's a little more than that. But that gives us a sort of a order of magnitude. And then the other thing is that apparently 500 units were sold, which 1,500 hobbyists is a relatively small, that's a tiny market. I'm surprised it's that small, especially because my HDZero video got 80,000 views, which is it's huge. So people are very interested in HDZero, but relatively few people actually have it. And then the other thing is 500 units to commercial or something. That's who bought 500 HDZero units? What company did that? I don't know. Yeah. That's a lot.
Well, from what we can get, my assumption would be, because of the time frame, right, is that it's Red Cat, one of their subsidiaries that bought them. So what was that? They talked for a little while about using with that remote, there was that remote company, Skype or Sonic, was that? Yeah.
Yep.
And that they were talking about integrating that HDZero. So maybe there were a large buy through Red Cat that was purchased into the other company or something.
That makes some kind of sense.
That's where my head was at. That's why they said enterprise too instead of commercial, maybe. I don't know.
That makes some kind of sense. That does. That's interesting. I hadn't gotten there. I thought they just sold it to some company. But if Red Cat bought it with the intent of putting it somewhere else,
that would be my guess.
They would want it.
I don't know for sure.
Anyway, we don't know that. We're just speculating there, to be clear.
Yeah.
So
and again,
15.
This is a YouTube comment from an account that used to be associated with Fatshark 100%. We cannot say for 100% certain that this person in control of this account still works for Fatshark, or that they still have valid information. But
I assume that's
account
Greg.
that they have previously used.
I assume that's Greg. If you look at the comment history, that certainly has been Greg at some point in time. Greg, Greg French, the owner of Fatshark. So in the past, Greg has controlled that account, and presumably that's him again.
For all those people who are going to complain when this is a YouTube comment that we cannot verify 100%.
Okay. So if that comment is true, then the size of the HDZero market is incredibly small, and I feel like I want to spin this into a positive, which is they've sold every gosh darn unit that they've been able to make. Maybe not all the ScoutHDs. They sell out the cameras. They sell out the VTXs. People want this system. The fact that only about 1,500 to 2,000 people have actually been able to get it, I mean, that's a small user base, but could potentially grow. But it's a really small user base.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mr. Huggy points out, valid point, Mr. Huggy. HDZero. Has HDZero sold any of the VRXs directly? I don't think they have.
Not that I'm aware of. I would assume that all the Sharkbyte branded VRXs went through Fatshark, so they would be selling them because they're Fatshark branded VRXs.
And HDZero's never made it. And the reason that's significant is because no matter how many cameras and VTXs HDZero sells, if you don't have a VRX, you can't use the system. So this is how many a cap on the maximum number of actual users out there today.
Yeah.
All right. Good to know.
Well,
very interesting stuff. Hopefully that number will get a lot bigger.
Speaking of speculation.
No, we're not doing. I thought we were not going to do any more, leaking and speculating, getting people in trouble. Let's just treat this exactly like it was a fact.
Oh boy, that'll go well. Okay. So Insta360 Cube. What do you guys think?
I think I want one.
This is a pretty good freaking render, I'll say, regardless. Whoever did this needs a job in working for one of these companies doing renders. It's a
this
great
makes
render.
so much sense because the Insta360 1R, this is what the camera module looks like, and it has little connectors on the back. This is 1000% plausible.
Yeah, I thought it looks a little small because the way they have the unit set up currently, but it does seem it seems plausible because there's no screen involved, right? And we know obviously the session worked, and we know there's a sensor in there and stuff. So however, if we look at the other information here, Oscar Liang reached out to Insta360. Insta360 says there's been no discussion of the new Cube camera inside our company. That would imply the information online regarding a new Insta360 Cube was inaccurate. That's an interesting way to say that, hey, that's not real. But they are claiming, Insta360 is claiming it's not real. So, however, I will say that there was so much push behind this that I saw so many people share this and were interested in this, especially after the GoPro Bones, and people were disappointed it was not in a session form factor, that I bet you if Insta360 can make this, they will make this.
I mean, yeah, this blew up. It went everywhere. I think they would absolutely. I mean, the question would be: would people buy this, or would they rather just buy like a Runcam Orange? That's the thing. The competitor would be something like the Runcam Orange, which in many ways would probably be a worse camera, but is fundamentally pretty cheap.
Yeah. So it'll depend on, and obviously they could also just be lying, and it could be real, and they could just be saying that, so we don't know.
It's possible.
I think with a leak that large, I don't know, with that picture out, typically you would think that they'd at least be going, yes, but we'll let you know more soon or something. I feel like that's a better way to temper the expectation. Yeah. Anyway, I bet they're looking at this. If they can make it, they will. I can almost guarantee you that. So
that's pretty cool. Dominic Clifton wonders if there's any GoPro patent infringement issues. I'm sure Insta360 is well aware of how to skirt GoPro's patents, being in the action cam market, but who knows?
Yeah.
I think this hit at just the right time because people saw the GoPro Bones and thought it was going to be a session replacement, and then when it wasn't, they were primed. And then this came out. Of course, this could be done by somebody who was like, "Okay, well, I'll make this instead. This is what I wish they'd made." I don't know. Make it, Insta360. I can't promise you we'll buy it because if there's anything I learned from the release of the GoPro Bones, it's that if you give us exactly what we want, we'll still hate you for it and complain that you didn't give us something else. But whatever.
Very true.
Okay. Next up, Blunty, what's next?
All right. HobbyKing. We talked about HobbyKing probably almost a year ago at this point. HobbyKing sells a bunch of different RC stuff, and they sold VTXs and unauthorized VTXs essentially by the FCC, and they were made an example of essentially by the FCC by a large court case, or a large fine rather, that they were issued back in 2020. They were issued a $2.8 million fine. HobbyKing argued about it and did not pay it. And then in 2021, we talked about it when they reissued the fine and said, "Hey, you really have to pay this. We don't care. This is your last chance." They still didn't pay it, turns out.
Shocker.
And now the feds are taking him to court. So in Portland, where they are incorporated, the U.S. District Court is filing a lawsuit. The Federal Communications Commission is going to take them to court. For $2.8 million. A lot of people now, of course, are going to say this won't mean a lot. I'm interested to see what happens, but a lot of people are saying like, it's a U.S. company and they have different places and they could just file bankruptcy and reopen and they have all these shells and stuff. You know, I don't know that much about this stuff, but I kind of am interested to see what happens here.
There's so much. I mean, this has been true ever since the original response. When the FCC first tried to fine them, HobbyKing said that we're closing our U.S. warehouse anyway, which of course they didn't. They also made some weird, like legally dubious claims, like the government comes to you, Blunty, and says, "We need to see your email records. We have a subpoena right here. You need to show us your email records," and you don't get to say, "Well, that would violate my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination." No, that's the point of a subpoena, is you are compelled to give us this evidence. It doesn't, and HobbyKing is like, "Well, we didn't know, and you can't do that." And it's like, bro, that didn't work the first time you got fined. Why would it work now? Good luck with that. But that's what they're doing.
Yeah, they're basically trying to argue semantics, but it's not clear if this will actually go anywhere or if it'll be, if they'll just dissolve or file bankruptcy to pay for part of it, or how it'll all work out. So
yeah. Well, the FCC is obviously serious about trying to collect this 2.8 million. I'm not going to name names, but there have been some people who have weighed in and said that if this really comes down to the wire, HobbyKing will just close their U.S. warehouse and leave the country. Which would, I don't know. Other people said HobbyKing is actually an arm of a much bigger company that has so much money that eventually they'll just pay the 2.8 million and not even notice. So I don't know who's right, but those are both interesting.
Trappy made a comment. I don't know if he knows anything extra, but Trappy made a comment on a post on Facebook, and he said essentially they'll probably file bankruptcy, use that bankruptcy reduction to reduce the fine down to maybe a third or something. They'll pay out the $1 million and then reopen as a new name because the company has tons of money and that it won't affect them. So
Cool
I don't
Cat
know
says they'll reopen as HobbyKing the following week. Yeah. Well, if they were to reopen as a new company, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because they're a little bit dated these days. Like I can't remember the last time I shopped at HobbyKing.
Seems like they're mainly selling like RC truck stuff, like Traxxas and that sort of thing.
Helix in Wonderland asks, why are car companies not fined for selling cars that go above the speed limit? Helix, it's just a different kind of regulation. For example,
there's no law.
A car company would be fined if they sold a car without seatbelts or airbags. There's a regulation that says they must have that. But the way the law is written is that a vehicle is allowed to exceed the speed limit, but not on a public road. The driver is responsible for obeying the speed limit on a public road. But if I take my Mustang to a racetrack, I can drive 100 miles an hour all day, and there's nothing illegal about that. With video transmitters, there are rules about what the technology is allowed to do and who's allowed to do it. And the bottom line is that the video transmitters they were selling were not legal to exist. It's not that they were legal if used in one way but not another way. They could do things that aren't allowed to do. Now, you could debate whether the law is fair or whether people say the FCC shouldn't even exist. That's not where we're going to go. But the actual answer to your question is that video transmitters are regulated in a different way than cars, and what they did was, in fact, illegal.
And also, I'll say part of this is marketing. They marketed these to drone enthusiasts, and the specific wording was drones.
Yep.
However, should have been marketed to licensed radio amateurs.
Correct.
Because of the way the transmitters work. So the fact that's part of the lawsuit, and part of the fine is that they found that they were marketing to people who could not legally use them.
So, for example, one of the things they did was they had 1.3 gigahertz video transmitters that would transmit on a frequency band that is not legal to use in the USA under any circumstances by unlicensed operators. Another thing that I don't know if it was the HobbyKing case specifically, I think this was actually the Get FPV case, is they had video transmitters that transmit at more than 1 watt, which is legal, but not for aerial telecommand of an RC model. Okay. Now, that's, a fine distinction in the law that we're not going to get into. But that's the FAA or the FCC's reading of it. So some stores got around this by selling the exact same video transmitters in a separate storefront that was marketed exclusively to ground vehicles. And they sell a 1.5 watt video transmitter, and there's no mention of aircraft anywhere on the website. And that's legal, or that's at least legal enough. But as soon as you start advertising it for use on an aircraft, now you're breaking the regulations. That's how it goes.
Yep.
All right. Anyway, Blunty, you actually have taken personal action on this, haven't you?
Yeah, I did this randomly 2 days before. I kept thinking, I was like, why haven't we heard about HobbyKing? What has happened? I even asked a couple of people and nobody knew. And I said, well, we got to be able to find out. So I emailed the FCC and I said, hey, has anything happened with HobbyKing? And they're like, we can't tell you, but you could also file the Freedom of Information Act. And so that's what I did. So on 4/12, I filed a Freedom of Information Act that will be filled in the next month. However, 2 days later, they filed this court case. So I'm not sure what we'll see here or what will come out of it. But my hope was to find out how much fines have been paid, what happened to the company, what the settlements were and all that kind of thing. But apparently it turns out none of that happened and they're being sued. So.
All right, great. Well, that's the update. We'll keep you updated as to what else is going on as it comes. Next up, we have a great community project. Hold on, I have to very carefully shoop. I do the titles so people who are scrolling through the replay. That's why I take them so seriously. It's not just my pet. It is my little pet peeve project too. Shoop. We got a new tool to help you make 3D printed camera mounts. And here's the thing, Blunty. If you know how to work in Fusion, do you use Fusion or SketchUp or any of those tools?
I've used Fusion, yep.
Yeah, okay. So if you know how to create a GoPro mount, once you've got the GoPro mount made for like a Hero 8, every time you get a new quadcopter, it's pretty easy to like stretch out the base and basically make it fit your new quadcopter if you know how to use Fusion.
Yeah.
Not if you don't. It's hard.
Right. Even if you do, it's still sometimes annoying. And if you have a bunch of different kinds and models, it takes work. It's not like easy. However, one user, Nate Harms FPV, has come up with a solution called FPV Mount Maker, mountmaker.net. And mountmaker.net is essentially a tool to make any kind of mounts that you need for different GoPros or cameras that you'll attach to your quad. This is a $7 payment for an app, and that gives you full access to make all these mounts and get updates and everything from him. So
yeah,
pretty cool.
You can see here in this video, it's open to public beta now. So if you want to try it out, there's a link in the video description and you can. But you can see here, they've just got all these sliders to make different kinds of bases and then different kinds of socks and then at the end, it just generates the G code and you print, or not the, is it G code? The STL. It generates the STL and you just print the STL. For whatever kind of quad you have. It's freaking amazing.
Yeah, I know he's been taking feedback and doing constant updates on it and trying to add different things and stuff. So
freaking
I'm sure
amazing.
if you see something that's not here or something that you'd want or changes or issues, he's here to cover them. And it's a paid app, so he's got reason to do it. I mean, that's part of why he's doing that. And to pay for server costs and stuff like that. So pretty cool. Very cool tool.
Yes. Now we've got let's take a look. Can we actually go here? Like, can we use it? Buy now, $7. He actually sent me a registration key, I think. Okay. So I'm not going to purchase it here there's a free demo you can download. Is this a standalone app or is this a web app?
The standalone app, I believe.
Oh, that's kind of, I don't know, that kind of nice. You making a standalone app in this day and age instead of a web app. I can't decide if I'm impressed or whatever. Anyway, yeah, definitely, like, as somebody who flies a lot of different quadcopters, I always struggle. I'm like, oh, okay, I've got a new quad to review. I need a GoPro mount for it. And a lot of times the manufacturer will send one, but like it's the wrong one. Like they send a Hero 9 and I have a Hero 8. If you always fly the exact same frame every day, this may not be as useful to you. But my God, this is going to be a lifesaver for me. It's really cool.
I would say, or if your frame is like super commonly used, like there'll probably be a bunch of stuff available for you, right? But if you have a frame that's not commonly used, or if you have some weird dimensions, or you're making custom stuff, this is like super, super easy.
Miss Stevie Woo says, just use Mesh Mixer for goodness sakes. I know. I have used Mesh Mixer before. I have a tutorial about how to use Mesh Mixer to slice the base off of one thing and put the top of another thing on there. I got to tell you, it's not as seamless as this. I mean, it's a great option. Mesh Mixer or SketchUp is a great option. There's no doubt. But the ability to just have a couple sliders that make the changes you want instead of having to use Mesh Mixer tools is going to be a great solution for a lot of people. Yep. Anyway, let's see here. Next up, we got some ExpressLRS news. ExpressLRS is hiring. How are they hiring if they're an open source project who has no money?
So you can thank Google. So Google.
No, I don't want to. Are you sure?
Yes.
Google has something to interrupt you.
Called Google Season of Docs. Okay. And so Google Season of Docs is a way for these open source projects to get funding to pay for people to technically do technical writing and updating on all the docs and get the docs all set up and correct for these different open source projects. So basically, the idea is to better document this open source stuff And you got to submit before the 25th of April to be a part of this and possibly get paid to do this if you wanted to do that. And there's submission information on the ExpressLRS page here, the GSOD, where you can go and get information about the scope and the timeline and the budget and all that kind of stuff. So pretty cool.
And I'm super, there we go. I'm super impressed with the work the ExpressLRS guys have done on their documentation. It's shockingly good, and yet in a fast-moving project like ExpressLRS, keeping it up to date is, of course, always a challenge. So obviously that's where, you know, I make my bread and butter, is making tutorials on this stuff, but having an up-to-date wiki is really a sign of a professional project. And for them to have gotten this grant to work on this is really exciting. Wesley Vardy says there weren't many open source projects that got selected for GSOD. It's pretty cool that they got selected. It is really cool. So if you're a technical writer and you're interested, well, first of all, if you're a technical writer and you're interested in helping, I'm sure they'd love your help either way. But now apparently they've actually got some financing, so that's always nice.
Yeah. Bryce says whoever has to write the documentation for a model match is going to kill themselves.
No, but why would you document that? It's so easy to use and obvious. You just...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, model match. I'm sorry. My mind was still back on the Mount Maker. Model match, Mount Maker. I'm sorry. No, the documentation for model matches. I thought I understood how ExpressLRS model match worked, and I started setting it up, and then I had a quad that wouldn't bind, and I was really sure that the receiver number was the same on both of them. And then I couldn't figure, I mean, I'm sure I would have figured it out eventually, but I just wanted to go fly. And then I was like, I'm not using, it turns out I'm not using model match. And I just set everything to 255 and got on with my life. So yeah, no. And then when you talk about which of the parameters are tied to the model number and which aren't, I was going to do a tutorial about it and realized I couldn't comprehend it all.
It's a good thing somebody's going to get paid to do that.
I guess. Yeah. That's where they should start. Alrighty. Next up, we come to a segment we like to call It's Barely News. Blunty came up with this for stories that are cool and fun and interesting, but not really like capital N news, and usually involve cute dogs being rescued or fed by drones. We got any dogs this week?
Not a dog, but another D-related animal that is saved by a drone. When you know it.
Dingo. It's a dingo, isn't it? Okay, first up,
a Japanese firm is abuzz after successfully testing drones to eliminate wasps. This is kind of fun, and I would not mind piloting and doing this. Basically, wasp removal can be kind of dangerous and
no kidding,
and frustrating, and some places are difficult to get to, and you don't want to get a ladder and get people up there and have safety concerns. So why not hook a vacuum up to a drone and suck all those wasps right out of there?
I've seen these guys on YouTube, the wasp removal guys, and I love them. I mean, they've got their wasp suit on, so they're generally safe. But they go in and they tear the nest apart and they vacuum up all the wasps. But you can see that, like, in this situation, it's not going to be... It's one thing if it's a ground nest or an accessible nest at like, body height. In this case, how are they... Like, can you imagine being up on a ladder trying to vacuum that thing up? Yeah, right. I just, God forbid you start getting stung. It'd be terrible. That's pretty cool. Yeah. That's pretty cool stuff. Vacuum up those wasps. All right.
Well, from animals that we want to, put away to animals we're saving. We've got some ducks that were rescued by drone. So the Dublin police have used a drone to rescue some distressed ducklings from a storm drain.
Hang on. I have to turn off my
I was going to say, that's why I use ad block.
I do. That's why they won't let me... That's why they won't let me see the content.
So, I don't know. I have uBlock Origin.
No thanks. No
thanks.
Doesn't
know better.
And then they're like, F you.
There
I
you
just
go.
want to see the ducks. No, hang on. Fine. Show me ads, you SOB. Go ahead, Blunty.
All right. So, So what might be a first, they've used a small drone to locate 8 ducklings that have fallen into a storm drain. And then were able to rescue the ducks out of the storm drain because they weren't sure where they were. They could hear them and they got called out to save them. They couldn't find them, so they flew down the pipes and found them, and then were able to use that to rescue them.
Oh, I see. When you said they flew down a storm drain, I was thinking about, like, how did you put a drone down with Pennywise? No, they flew into, like, the end of a pipe.
Yeah, exactly. We're like looking through and trying to figure out exactly where those ducks were. And we're able to find them. So pretty
Oh,
cool.
man, that's...
More and more animals saving.
What can't
being
drones
saved.
do?
Yeah.
Just saving.
Well, I'll tell you one thing drones can't do is prevent getting taken down by a laser. The Navy has tested laser destruction of drones and the first test they've ever done on it. So yeah, they were able to use a ground-based laser system to home in on a drone flying by, shoot a high-energy beam, and then blow it up in a ball of fire. So kind of interesting. This is the first time this has ever been tested that we know of, at least.
Well, interesting. Yeah, it says they used a high-energy invisible laser. Invisible to the naked eye. UV lasers scare the shit out of me. Like, the one saving grace of a laser is when it shoots you in the eye. You go, ah! And then, like, hopefully you're not blind. But UV lasers?
Yeah, it's just cooking
Shut
your
up.
eye. And you,
it's just, you can't, it's the worst.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is UV or infrared. I'm not sure where this lands, how that works. But
the ability to shoot down drones is pretty challenging. They move pretty fast. And with, like, ballistic munitions, if you miss, now you've got something coming down somewhere else downrange, which may be a populated area. So shooting a laser into the sky seems pretty safe, I guess. Of course, the disadvantage is that the laser energy dissipates over. You have to have a pretty high-powered laser. So I guess they've got one, though. So there you go. F you, drones. We got freaking laser beams.
Yeah. The one other things they talk about are just the fact you don't have to use gunpowder, propellants. There's no accidental explosions. There's a lot of benefits to lasers. So pretty cool.
Nice. Alrighty. Hold on. I can't get this next page to work because it's trying to get me subscribed to their newsletter. Next up, there is an underwater drone.
Yeah. We've talked about underwater drones a little bit before, and traditionally, underwater drones are tethered. So, because it's hard to get RF through that water. It's not
Radio
easy.
waves don't like to go through water.
Yeah, however, the Hydrus is taking a different approach. And instead of using tethered information, it's using sonar communication, and it's using AI as a combination to travel and traverse the seabeds and do the studying and detect different things that they need to in the area about flows and travel of the water and different life and stuff. And yeah, they're basically pioneering this world of long-range drone use underwater. They talk about things like really high latency levels, different ways to analyze the sonar signals, how the AI handles, how its sonar pulses control versus the ground and how it's controlling around and stuff. Yeah, super interesting. So
nice, interesting. New way to control drones with sonar.
Yeah, and currently they've got it where it can dive about 3 kilometers and operate for around 3 hours on a single charge. And it uses that AI to analyze what it's seeing. So pretty cool.
Next up, Blunty, do you remember the commercial? We made fun of this on the news for Amazon Ring Always Home. It was a drone, a home security drone that would fly around your house and they showed a frickin' somebody breaking into your house and the drone comes out and he's like, oh, and he leaves instead of just like swatting it out of the air. You remember that? I do.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember
absolutely.
That? Well, apparently someone turned one of those into a ripping freestyle drone.
Oh, not just someone. It's Quad Mover.
Quad Mover, yes. Here we go. Oh, yeah, that seems legit.
So, this is an STL that he made and a drone design he made from, just an early version of 2 public images that they put together. And
this isn't even, he didn't just like buy one and rip the guts out of it. He made his own
literally
kit.
Just from images and recreation and modeling. Pretty cool.
Looks legit.
Yeah.
It looks legit.
And if anybody's going to LOS a replica Amazon drone, it's got to be Quad Mover, right?
Quad Mover can LOS with the best. There's no doubt. What's the point? Is the point just that he's trying to get clicks by making a replica Amazon drone?
Yeah, it's a thing to make. It's kind of neat.
Kind of a cool thing.
It also accrues super weird. He like tries to do a bunch of LOS stuff as the video goes on, and it operates super funky because of that bottom weight.
Yeah. Well, it's made to land into a charging cradle. So, well, I'm always happy to see Quad Mover doing weird shit, blowing our minds with his line of sight skills. Last up, we have, this was submitted by several people. We have a drone being flown by our friend of the channel, Beverly Hills Aerials, at the USFL. Apparently, there's a new football league. I didn't know that. And similar to like the Skycam that they have on cables, this is flying a drone. Here, let me go back and start it again. Did you watch this, Blunty? What'd you think of it? Blunty? Have I muted you somehow? Blunty? He's gone. Blunty's gone, everybody. He hates football. Are you still in the call, Blunty? He's still in the Discord call. Alrighty. Well, hopefully he'll be back. Unfortunately, I guess it's so weird to be here without him. Alright, I guess we'll continue. How can we continue without Blunty? Anyway, all right, let's go to the right screen and maybe he'll come back. We got footage by a friend of the channel, Beverly Hills Aerials, at the USFL. So they have decided to...
All right, am I back?
There.
Maybe I'm
Oh,
back.
you're back. Yay.
I can't see you if I'm back, so...
You can't see me? Well, your voice is back. But I don't think
Hello.
you're... Oh, there you are. Yay.
All right. Don't know. That's weird, but...
Oh, we have both your voices now. Mute the wrong one.
Okay. We're good.
Okay. So, Blunty, USFL, flying a drone on the field during a football game. Thoughts
Yes.
about that?
Pretty cool. I don't know. Yeah, it seems pretty cool to me. I don't know if we showed that last link there, that Twitter link. That is a great example of what the shots will be like, and I think it is pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, we saw the first link. The second link, I think it's, I know the one you're talking about.
It's an example of a play that's like super well covered, I think, by drone.
Yeah. And it's, when I first saw this, I thought they were like reenacting a play just for the, but no, they literally have the drone out there flying during the play.
Yeah.
Like, this is during the game, the drone is on the field, which on the one hand is like super cool. And for those of us in FPV, that's not weird, but you got to imagine, like, for people who aren't used to drones, it could be distracting. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of complaints. I know we linked that Drone GP article where people were complaining, there's probably going to be a lot of noise issues. And there's, a lot of people are saying, like, they don't even like the camera angle, make them dizzy and stuff. I think there's going to be a lot of work on, like, how it's going to be presented to people and what will be shown to them and when does that happen? Is it just like, I don't know. I think maybe there'll be rules about how low and how you can be, because I know a lot of those situations seem like they are quite low. So.
Yeah. Like right there over the player's shoulder. Here we've got set up for, I think, a kickoff flying down over the field. There's the Skycam you can see in the upper left. So that people have gotten used to. The Skycam is on tethers and basically flies over the field by extending and retracting the tethers. So in that sense, it's not much different, but the Skycam is like never, I think, below head level, and certainly can't get in with the players like this drone can. To me, this just looks like a Cinewhoop shot. It doesn't seem weird at all. But you got to imagine to, your typical football fan out there in the world, this is disorienting, perhaps?
Yeah, I would agree. I think for a lot of people, this is going to be different or weird or confusing. But I think in a lot of other sports, it can be good. I just don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to navigate because honestly, if you know how the plays work, right, there's a lot of situations where you could fly a drone where you're not going to get hit, or at least you can have an idea of like ball trajectory and who's holding what and who's tackling who and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think it's going to be something where you can interrupt the game if you know the game.
Right.
But I think there are opportunities for that to happen. Just like you talked about the Skycam, a ball can hit a Skycam too, right? So
it's true. I mean, I'm sure that must have happened at some point in time. DC says the quad was inbounds and below the tops of the player's head during a pursuit. Seems poorly executed. I mean, DC, I would assume that Beverly Hills Aerials is working with the league and that these are the shots they want. I would assume that the SOP for Beverly Hills Aerials about where they can and can't fly is well defined, because if they affect the outcome of a game, that will be a big deal. And so I'm sure they're not doing anything they're not supposed to do. And I assume that the league has decided that the appeal of this kind of novel shot, the ability to run along with the football player looking over his shoulder, is worth... I mean, well, there shouldn't be any safety risk because they're doing this legally. And legally, the only way to fly over people is... currently, the only way to practically do it is to be sub 250. Technically, there are things in the regulations to let you do it if you're over 250 grams, but realistically, I don't think anyone's doing that. So they've built some kind of custom sub 250 rig specifically for this, I guess. Accident waiting to happen. An accident waiting to happen? Sorry, Blunty, I cut you off there. You mean we're playing the sport of professional football and you think the most accident-prone, dangerous thing on the field is a sub 250 gram drone? Really?
Yeah.
Sorry, Blunty, go ahead.
Well, also they're all wearing helmets. So
I know. Also, they're all giving each other traumatic brain injury for 15 years before they retire and, spend the end of their career drooling. So yeah, let's make sure this drone doesn't present any danger to them. Apologies to any football fans if that was a little too real. Anyway, if they were in a covered stadium, they'd be indoors, but they are clearly not in a covered stadium during this specific one. Alrighty, well, cool, always good. And when I saw Beverly Hills Aerials name, I was especially excited because, of course, they've been a fan of the channel. They've been on live streams. I've chatted with them, and so super happy to see them succeeding. Okay, Blunty, we got one more thing. We got a rant. A rant.
Yes.
What's the rant this week, Blunty?
All right, so I'd like to talk about angle mode, and specifically.
You're going to rant about angle mode.
I'm going to rant a little bit about angle mode. Yes, I'm just going to.
What about angle mode could make you mad enough to rant?
It's more like a focused discussion, but let's talk about angle mode. Something that we see a lot in track designs is people deciding whether they should design tracks for angle mode, for acro mode, or for both when you design whoop tracks, right? It can be a concern because things like split S's, things like dives, right, can be easier or harder based on what mode you're flying in. So a lot of people talk about the fact that, let's say you're doing a 10 race series, you should have balanced tracks between angle and acro, 5 angle, 5 acro, so at least there's some kind of idea, or, have them all mixed so that there's not an issue where people are like gaining a huge advantage over one another. I think it's interesting to consider because there's two pieces to this puzzle. One is that angle mode people are specifically limiting themselves, right? So by angle mode, you are saying, I cannot move past this max angle. So that means I cannot dive into this gate as fast as somebody doing acro, right? That's just facts of how angle mode works. However, if you consider the other side of things, I think there's kind of the same thing to say, like, well, acro pilots are saying, well, angle is easier in a lot of cases, right? Because angle like helps you get around things and there's less skill involved, or there can be less skill involved in automatic springing back, right? That's kind of a learned mechanism and it doesn't take as much reflex to do that. I know because I'm an angle pilot trying to transition to acro, it's a lot of challenge. It's not easy.
Yeah, we should say, in case people don't know, Blunty, that you are highly skilled, not to blow you up, but you're a very skilled tiny whoop racer. You have won, championships and you know what you're talking about here.
Yeah, well enough. I feel like I'm good enough at talking about this stuff. But yeah, so I think there's a couple questions here. It's like, where should the hobby cater to people who want to use angle mode and try to make it fair for everybody who's racing in the context of angle versus acro like that? Or should people just design tracks to be the most fun and interesting tracks? And then people race what they race. And if you're angle, you'll be at a disadvantage based on some of the options.
Let's get some perspective on what the history of what has happened, because I saw some of this playing out at the last whoop race I went to here in Knoxville. There was a dive gate, and And I don't think it was designed with angle or acro mode in mind. It was just a relatively big gate that people would dive down. And the people who were flying in acro mode were much faster because everybody else kind of in angle mode kind of took it flat and spiraled down through it. But the people in acro mode could literally invert and go down through it and stay on the throttle. And I think if we look at the history of whoop racing, what you'll find is that tracks have always been designed with expectation of that people are flying in angle mode because that's historically what they have been doing. And then at some point, some people decided they would try acro mode and they were faster through a certain obstacle. And then did people start designing tracks specifically with acro mode in mind? Or is it just that they're designing tracks and it turns out it's faster if you do it in acro mode, so people are?
Right. I think it takes some special consideration to design a track that is not faster in acro. I would say that.
Right.
Like, so I think that's part of the value.
It's the other way. You would have to go out of your way to avoid certain obstacles, which have been present in angle mode racing.
Yes.
You would have to restrict your use of obstacles to avoid a situation where acro is faster. Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the things, that could be a solution here is some kind of hybrid angle acro, right? We've got things like NFE racer mode. That's one of the things that's come out where NFE racer is essentially acro in pitch, but angle and roll. And that's so you get the rebound on the roll, but you can move freely in pitch so you can do full dives. However, that still takes the correction back to center, right? It's kind of interesting. One thing also that I've talked about a little bit, but I don't know that it's possible currently, at least in Betaflight, due to Quick Flash discussing it with me, was basically Betaflight calculates angle based on the Euler angle method, I believe, instead of the quarter Nyon method. And because of the Euler method, once you get past an 85-degree angle, you can't really calculate the angle the same way, and it goes all wonky. And so if you tried to go in the software and set a higher max angle than 90 somehow, what would happen is you just get freak out by the quad because it doesn't know exactly where it's at.
Yeah. I think a lot of this is similar to arguments. Oh, sorry, Blunty, you paused. I thought you were
sorry, half the chat is saying horizon mode. I don't think anybody knows what horizon mode is. Horizon mode is where once you go past a certain angle, you do an automatic flip. And that angle cannot be more than 90 degrees. So the same issue happens.
Right. So, you're not in angle mode when you're past 90 degrees.
Correct.
I think this argument is similar to the argument that people run into when they try and set up spec racing leagues. If you were to say you can only race this track in angle mode, you're doing the same thing people do when they set up a spec racing league and they say you can only race these motors or you can only have so much, whatever the spec is. You're creating a spec racing league. And there are benefits and reasons to do spec racing to kind of level the playing field. So to me, the question is, do you want whoop racing to become a spec racing thing where you explicitly say acro mode is not allowed? Or do you want to set up a track and let people race it the fast? Because there was a time when racers went from 4S to 6S. And some people were like, hey, that's too fast and we're burning out our ESCs and we can't keep up. And no one historically didn't say, no, you can't use 6S. It was just like, whatever you're going to do to race, just do it.
Yeah.
So
kind of an interesting concept. It's something to think about. I think that, I don't know. I think it does make sense. The idea that there's a split, eDoc says in the live stream chat on the Discord, the flip side is every track in the We Bleed series, no matter what the top time is from an acro pilot.
Well, I think that's the thing. I think that the angle pilots don't like that the acro pilots are faster. And the angle pilots are noticing that there are certain obstacles where the acro pilots are faster. And they are worried that tracks will be built with more and more of those obstacles that put them at a disadvantage, and then they won't be able to fly the way they like to fly.
It can also be challenging if you're going week to week and the track can vary in difficulty from angle to acro, and you're trying to compete with everybody else in the series. Then you're suddenly fighting on different, it almost feels like you're fighting on different levels, right? Because one week you can fly at the same skill level and keep up. But now if there's 3 dives, suddenly you're 3 seconds behind and there's no way you can catch up. Well, that's kind of an interesting concept,
Yeah, but aren't the acro mode pilots just always faster no matter what? Is that
Yes, but not by 3 seconds, I guess. You know, like if you're fighting on a leaderboard and you're trying to push up the leaderboard times and you're seeing these gaps, right? It's a big difference, especially like mentally, to see 3.5 seconds instead of 0.3 seconds, because there was like a part of a dive that I had to twist into instead of 3 giant dives that I could not go directly into.
Right.
That's kind of the idea. So.
Right. What I think what we're seeing happening and what people are worried about is that if this trend continues, angle mode whoop racing is just going to become obsolete no matter what they do with the tracks.
It certainly feels like, from the Weebly perspective of looking at how the series is going and how a lot of people are talking and just like general movements, you know, we talked about AK going to angle or acro, and a lot of people are doing that as well. It seems like a lot of the Whoop community is pushing to go to acro, and that a lot of tracks will probably be leaning towards acro because of the push towards acro. That's what I would guess.
So I mean, there we go. It's just a done deal. Anybody who doesn't, who's serious about racing, needs to start racing in acro.
I would say if you care about position versus acro pilots, I do think you would have to start learning acro. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then, should we do anything about this? Should the Weebly series design tracks specifically to be easier for angle mode pilots or not put them at a disadvantage?
Well, I'm not sure. I think that's kind of up to the series, like we talked about a little bit. You know, maybe you should set specs for that or make decisions about that at the beginning. And as long as people know that, and as long as you're clear about that as you go into it, I think that's fine. But, you know, there was some upset from racers when they saw that how acro-focused some tracks were that we got to in the series. And it is understandable, but also it's understandable from the other side to say, I'm not going to cater to your limiting that you've done to yourself, right? So,
right. It's about expectation. Yeah. If they came into it expecting that their angle mode skills would translate, and then they didn't, it's valid to be upset about that. But I think that the message, is that the days of angle mode only whoop racing are limited, and if you're serious about racing, it's time to get. I mean, why did whoop racers always race in angle anyway? Why weren't they in acro? And clearly, that reason is no longer true.
Yeah, I know part of what people said was because of just quality of like flight control and stuff on those small quads, and like how everything was handled with noise on the small boards and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the gap was there. So.
All right. Well, that's enough of that ranting. We're 17 minutes over, but I don't mind because we made a lot of good content. Let me read the super chats for people. Golden FPV, thanks for a $2 super chat. Blackbug Digital, thank you for 120. I can never remember what that money is, but thank you for 120 of them. Happy 420 to both of you, Blunty. It's 420. No, it's not. It's 419. It's not 420 yet.
Tomorrow.
What a shame. Well, I'm sure I know how you're going to celebrate. Same as you celebrate every day. Mike Speedy FPV, thank you for a £5 super chat. Blizzard FPV, $2 Canadian. Thank you so much. Insta360, I hope you step on a Lego with your fake cube. Miguel T, thank you for a $5 super chat. If external 4-in-1 and Beta FPV ELRS nano modules, should I get Zorro 4-in-1 with external ExpressLRS or internal ExpressLRS with external 4-in-1? Internal ExpressLRS only 250 milliwatts. In your situation, I would get an internal 4-in-1 with an external 1 watt ExpressLRS module since you have a use for the 4-in-1. That's what I would do.
Yes. Good call.
And Asif Kahlan, thank you for 6 of another currency I don't recognize the symbol for, but thank you. Iron Beam is a laser weapon from Israel. Laser weapons. Cool. That is going to do it. Blunty, thank you so much. We will see you next week.
Yeah, thanks everybody for hanging out, having a good old show. Thanks for staying with us along. If you were still here, don't forget to go down and give this a like. That's always helpful for the show. Any comments you've left are always helpful. We do appreciate you sharing this with anybody else, subscribing to the channel if you haven't hit that big red subscribe button, and then also comment on this video afterwards so other people see it and it gets that algorithm kicking. We appreciate all that stuff. Also, visit me at itsblunty.com if you don't mind.
Definitely.
And we always appreciate that. I do one-on-one troubleshooting that is reasonably priced, and I am happy to help you. Also happy to help you any other time. You can get links to my Patreon or Discord there as well. Thank you so much.
That's true. We should plug you earlier. Blunty, we always put that off to the end, and that's so polite of you, but we should plug you earlier. The viewership is still pretty high, though. Itsblunty.com. The number one thing you can do is you can get Blunty on the phone for, it looks like, $50 flat rate.
Yeah, and the hour's flexible. We'll get your problem solved. That's the goal, right? So
yeah. Nice. I always say, Blunty, that you're just as smart as I am, but you charge less money for one-on-one time. So people should just...
That's true.
Sometimes people, I guess they like my short beard better. But there you go.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Johan Davel de Beer, thank you for 35 South African Rand. You guys are playing with fire, leaving super chats right at the end of the stream. You're going to get missed. Any thoughts on a double camera setup for VR FPV? No. Like there used to be a 3D camera with dual cameras,
Is that
but
Skyzone?
I don't know. Skyzone goggles could work with it. No, I don't really. I don't think there's currently an off-the-shelf solution being made. There used to be some off-the-shelf stereo camera solutions, but I don't think they're being made anymore. So no, I'm sorry, I don't have a thought about that, except to tell you that I don't think anyone makes it anymore. All right, folks, you have a great week. We'll see you next week at the same time. Happy flying, everybody.
Later, guys.